This is the Franchise QB Podcast, where we empower entrepreneurs to win big in franchising. We huddle up weekly to educate our audience about the most successful small business model ever created, franchising.
Welcome to the Franchise QB Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Halpern, a 20-year industry veteran and entrepreneur. My mission is for listeners to achieve their American dreams of creating wealth and independence through franchise ownership. Every week, we speak with franchisees, franchisors, or vendors that support the industry. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. Joining us in the huddle today is Scott Oakes, VP of Franchise Development with Comfort Keepers. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
It is great to have you here, Scott. So you have an impressive 22-year background in franchising in several industry segments, including home services, telecom, restaurants, and healthcare. It seems like home healthcare is a common theme throughout your career. Tell us about your franchising journey and what keeps you coming back to the home healthcare space.
Yeah, it's funny. My first foray into franchising kind of happened the way a lot of candidates that I've spoken with over the years end up finding themselves looking into their own business, right? I had taken a job out of college. I worked there for 6 years. The economy started to change a little bit, and I was in the manufacturing sector, and we were talking about, hey, we might have to make some cuts, and thinking about having to reduce teams, looking at budgets. And one day I walked in, and I was the cut. I was, I think I was in my late 20s, and I remember going home to my wife, going, "Hey, I just got downsized. Like, that doesn't happen to 20-something-year-olds." And she goes, "Well, middle management's middle management. It doesn't matter how fast you get there, right?" And so when I had that opportunity to kind of think about what I wanted to do next, I really thought long and hard about wanting to be involved in something where I felt like I was making some type of impact in terms of what I was doing, right? And out of nowhere, I got recruited by a franchisor, handyman connection out of Cincinnati, which was where I was located at. And they were looking for a director of franchise development, somebody who hadn't had any experience in franchising because they didn't want anybody with, quote, bad habits. So they were looking to try to train somebody from the ground up. And what really appealed to me about franchising and this process was that it did feel a lot more like a selection, like an awarding process versus just a sales process, right? There's definitely a sales aspect to what we do in franchise development, but also what we're also trying to do is make sure that we're finding the right person for that kind of job description of franchisee. So, if we didn't think someone was a good fit, or if we thought they might be better doing something else, we kind of had that ability to be a little bit selective. The other thing that jazzed me up was being part of watching people kind of pursue their dreams of starting their own business, right? And following that American dream of entrepreneurship, right? And I thought watching someone come in, bet on themselves, be part of a franchise, and then watching them grow and expand, that could be very rewarding to me. And 20 plus years later, it absolutely has been that, and then some. I've been in the healthcare space a couple of times now. Is that when I first got into the home care space, the mission really resonated with me in terms of having family members who had needed some type of care as they got older. Like, I really understood what we were trying to do. It was something that I could be very passionate when I talk to candidates about. That industry does a great job of combining, hey, all the great things about owning and operating your own business from a financial standpoint, from an independent standpoint. But now you've got this added layer of every day we get a chance to help take care of people's moms and dads and grandparents and make an impact. So it was a really good combination of kind of meeting the business side of it, but also meeting that personal motivation and wanting to help and make an impact side of it.
Yeah, that all makes sense, and I appreciate the backstory. And you and I have that in common. In my 20s, back in the 90s, I got laid off from a startup.com when the dot-com bubble burst, and it was an amazing experience. Met some great people, really smart people. but we generated a lot of revenue and lost a lot of money at the same time. In fact, we were competing with Amazon. So Amazon's still around. The company I work for isn't. But I fell into franchising after that, and I've been in the space 20 plus years. So wasn't a fun day when the pink slips came around, but it was a good pivot for me, and it was early enough where I could kind of sink my teeth into the
and I don't know if from your standpoint, but it has oddly been a connection point with a lot of folks and candidates that I've spoken with over the years who have gone through similar things, right? They're in that kind of crossroads because they weren't expecting to be at that crossroads, and now they're trying to figure out, okay, what do I want my next act to be?
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about the subject franchise of the conversation today, Comfort Keepers. What is Comfort Keepers for anyone that's not familiar with the brand?
Yep. So Comfort Keepers provides non-medical care services to a client base that's primarily made up of seniors. When you think of people like 65 plus who are looking for some additional care or help in the home. What we do is we recruit caregivers to provide primarily what's classified as companion or personal care services, typically services that don't require an RN to administer the care. So everything from meal preparation, transportation services, bathing, changing, grooming, things like that, where you can bring a caregiver into the home to help that family member with their everyday living activities, but will allow them to stay in their home and try to maintain that independence or sense of independence as long as possible before or completely avoid moving into more of a facility-based care program. And in many cases, the caregivers we're bringing in are either replacing or giving family caregivers that needed break that they need, right? So much of the care responsibility falls on family members. And a lot of times services like we provide at Comfort Keepers can be that respite care to them, which ultimately for the family means that the time they are spending with their family member is more around building and maintaining those relationships, enjoying the time together versus just doing all of the to-do stuff that family caregivers end up finding themselves having to do.
Right. And Comfort Keepers is a pretty mature system. Can you give the audience a sense of the scale, like how many franchise owners are currently operating within the system?
Yeah, so Comfort Keepers has been in business now for over 27 years. We've got over 640 or so operating territories throughout the U.S. and Canada. The bulk of them are in the U.S. I think we've got a little over 30 franchisees and territories operating in Canada, but we have about 210 or so individual franchisees in the U.S. operating those territories. So a large number of our franchisees operate multiple territories, many out of a single office location.
Yeah, so how does Comfort Keepers continue to scale the business by bringing in new owners, but also keeping the support structure in place that the existing owners need to be successful?
Yeah, I think anytime when you're thinking about growing your system, you should always be first thinking about, okay, if we're able to grow like that, how are we going to support those franchisees, whether it's training, whether it's ongoing field operational support, marketing support, that type of thing. And I kind of equate it to a little bit like sports, kind of look to where the ball is going, not to where it is, right? So when we were looking at kind of rebuilding our franchise development and rejuvenating our growth from bringing in new franchisees, the first thing we looked at was, okay, do we have the support team that we need? So we actually made some changes to our support staff, added a couple of regional directors to make sure that we were going to be able to support the new franchisees coming in without dropping any of the support for our existing franchisees. And then we also actually moved somebody into a role of a franchise development specialist whose main job is to work with all of our new incoming franchisees so that they've got a dedicated resource to guide them through the process.
Sounds like you guys were pretty forward thinking in terms of how to handle the growth, which I think a lot of people considering getting into the space can appreciate. Yep. So what makes senior care franchising such a strong business opportunity right now, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, the easiest thing for me to point to would just be the sheer demand for the services in terms of the demographics of the senior population in the US, right? You've got over 50 million people right now that are age 65 and older. And so we're at a point to where, those folks are living longer, whether it's through, taking better care of themselves, medication or whatever. But when you couple that with any survey I've ever seen of seniors, in terms of, would you prefer to age in place in your home or move into a facility? Over 90% of seniors say they want to stay in their homes, right? And homes could be a lot of places, right? Homes could be the home that they've lived in for the last 40 years. It could be a condo community. It could be, it could even be an independent living facility. Wherever they feel like they maintain their independence, is really, the kind of where they want to be able to stay. And so you just got those sheer numbers in terms of population. And then you also have societal factors impacting those demand for services, right? You take someone like myself, I'm in my early 50s. I've got parents who are in their mid to late 70s. I've got one kid in college, one kid still in high school, right? So it's commonly referred to as like the sandwich generation, right? Because you're still raising your kids, but now your parents are needing some care as well. And as that adult child, you only have so much bandwidth that you can do. And so that's impacting the demand for services. And I think lastly, just from a migratory society standpoint, when I grew up, we had plenty of family in town. Like if my great grandparents needed help, it was just like, hey, who is taking shifts? And as a society, we've moved away. A lot of the calls we get are from family members who need services for someone that lives more than 4 hours away from them, right? So just from that standpoint, it also creates a demand for services because there's just not any family members around to help take care of those elderly parents and grandparents.
Yeah, and to your point about the demand, I mean, there's obviously a tremendous need for this service. 50 million people, 65 plus, and that's not going to change anytime soon. So, what makes Comfort Keepers different? There's other people that compete in this space. What kind of sets you guys apart?
I think I'll start with just the strong focus on providing our franchisees with assistance with recruiting caregivers, right? Because we know the demand is out there. And so part of what the challenge can sometimes be in a business like ours is, hey, making sure that we've got enough of the right caregivers that we need to service the number of clients that we have, right? So, we have gone out and really focused on trying to leverage the size of our franchise organization, whether it's to get them, corporate discounts on job sites like Indeed. On top of that, though, we went out and created our own comfortkeepers.job site that operates a lot like other job sites out there, but these are listings that our franchisees can post for caregiver jobs. We're getting hundreds of applications a week for those job postings, and it's provided a really strong resource for our franchisees to be able to get access to those caregivers. And then coupling that with training services that franchisees can utilize to make sure that their caregivers are properly trained before they're going out and starting to work with clients. And that also helps with caregiver retention. You can build in training modules that caregivers continue to take as their employment evolves and they become more valuable. You can reward them by investing in them through training. And the other big thing that is a differentiator for us is our focus on our interactive caregiving model. And that is something that we've developed over the years where we want our caregivers working with our clients instead of around their clients. And there's a focus on whenever we can get a client engaged in whatever activity that we're doing, right? Might be making a meal, it might be doing something outside in the garden or something. We're going to try to include the client in that activity as much as possible, right? So it's just not like, hey, we set you at the table, we bring you the meal, and then we come back when you're done. Like, we want you in the kitchen with the caregiver as much as they can be, right? The caregiver is going to interact with them during the meal, because we're not only looking to create a safe environment and check off the to-do list of the things that need to be done, we're also focused on the quality of life for our clients. And so we want to make sure that they've got that interactive caregiving approach so that when our caregiver leaves, that was the best part of our client's day. And we feel like that you can do the mix of providing great service and doing it in a way that does enhance the impact and value for the client and their mental well-being as much as keeping them safe physically.
Yeah, and I really can appreciate the amount of like support you provide owners with, hiring great caregivers. It's a very intimate job. They're going in someone's house, they're dealing with seniors, like the adult decision maker. It really cares a lot about who's going to be with mom or dad during the day. So the franchise owner has to really hire for quality of person, like behaviors. It's not, you know, they're not unskilled. You need skills to go in someone's house and provide
Yep.
these things, but they're also, really trying to find really good people that are dependable, reliable, have a good bedside manner, all that. So I can see that you win and lose in this business by the quality of caregivers that you're able to employ.
Yep. No, yeah, I absolutely say that all the time. You're only as good as your worst caregiver, right? So,
Yeah,
and
it's a good
so
point.
the caregivers are the product and service that we're offering. So the better job we do of finding and hiring the right people, and the better job we do of taking care of those caregivers, the better job the caregivers will do of taking care of our clients.
Yeah. So you're in an interesting space, right? It's a business, so you need to make money, and the
Yep.
franchise owner has to be profitable. But there's this mission-driven side of the business as well, because you're caring for elderly people. So how do you balance the two?
Yeah, I really believe those things are interconnected because if your focus is on providing the best care, taking care of clients like you would if they were your own family member, and doing that with each client consistently, combined with hiring the right folks and recognizing and rewarding the behavior and actions you want to see out of your caregivers, if that's your focus, you're going to be providing a very high level of service to your clients, and that's going to spread through word of mouth. That's going to spread through reputation, and so if your mission is, hey, let's provide the best care possible, and that will fill up your cup, so to speak, from that emotional and mission driven side of the business, the volume will come because it's going to come because you're providing the best services out there. And so I believe the balance will create itself if your end focus is always on delivering the best care that you can.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I can imagine in a business like this, there's a lot of word of mouth. If someone's parent is getting great care, they're going to tell other people about it. And they're probably going to tell people about it if it's not great care. That's going to spread probably faster if they don't
Yeah.
have a good experience. So
Yeah.
you talked about the demand, and we all know it's not going anywhere. Are there any trends in the senior care market that continue to drive demand? Is it just a product of how many people are out there that need the service?
I think one of the things that is a little bit of a holdover from COVID and the pandemic was that during the pandemic there was a lot of concern about facility-based care when you have something that's going around. A lot of people got pulled out of nursing homes and things like that, just out of from a safety concern, from a care concern. And what they were finding was that, wow, this is a better experience bringing care into the home, versus moving them back into a care facility when kind of things with the pandemic kind of receded, right? And I think that has continued, beyond the pandemic. That families want to make sure that their family members are in these comfortable environments where they can still have some level of independence. So, that was one thing prior to the pandemic that was a talking point we would have to discuss a lot, right? Hey, why not just move mom or dad into a facility versus home care? And that conversation has changed a lot during that time. I think the other trends that you're starting to see in the senior care market is how can technology help augment the care of the caregiver, right? Technology is never going to replace caregivers in the homes, right? This is very much a very personal people business, right? But how can technology start to help improve outcomes and improve care and give our caregivers information and tools to help make them more effective at their jobs?
Yeah, so how do you, like, if a candidate's evaluating your model? I know for people that are in their 40s, 50s that are looking to get into business, the tech stack matters because it changes so quickly, and it's a big piece of like why you decide to make an investment. Is there certain technology that you guys implement that makes operations easier for both the franchise owner and their clients?
Yeah, so talk about first about kind of the operating platform that our franchisees use on a regular basis to help run and operate their business, right? In terms of scheduling caregiver management platform. Our franchisees use a couple of different platforms out there. You've got WellSky, you've got ERSP, you've got Access Care, which are some of the primary ones that the home care industry in general have used in the past to manage that side of it. You've got emerging platforms like Viv Technologies that we've started to implement here at Comfort Keepers that now integrate artificial intelligence to analyze caregiver notes, identify trends, streamline operations. They can assist with caregiver scheduling. So if you have a caregiver call out all of a sudden, instead of it taking an hour to find a replacement caregiver because you're calling one at a time, you can do group text, and then the AI can identify, hey, who's available, who's not, and take something that used to take an hour of time down to 10 to 15 minutes from that standpoint. So operationally, you have to stay on top of the things that are going to build those efficiencies into your operation, right? Because every labor hour you can pull back from an administrative task is an additional labor hour you can put on the front lines in terms of customer service or interacting with the caregiver. From a client side of things, one of the tools that we utilize through those same technologies is a Family Connect portal, where families can go in through a secure online platform and see caregiver notes in real time, get updates on what's going on with their family members, look at activity logs, photos, scheduling tracking, all of those things, so that whether a family member is in town or in another state, they can always have access to what's going on with their family member at any time. And then you've also got technology advances happening in terms of home monitoring services. And this goes beyond kind of the emergency alert systems that just aren't simply the I've fallen and I can't get up buttons anymore. These technologies, some of which we offer at Comfort Keepers, are full-blown wellness platforms. They've still got wearable buttons and things like that to help. But, the direction this is going is that it's watching over someone during the times where the caregiver can't be there. So it's helping extend the hours of coverage of monitoring for when you don't have that person in there. And then you can also, when a caregiver comes in next, you've got some data that can help them go, okay, how did they sleep the night before? How many times did they get up and use the restroom, right? Things that might impact how they work with that client the next day.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting how the technology can kind of lead to the continuity of care. So even though it's two different people, they can still know exactly what's going on. It's like when there's a shift change, it's like the client doesn't feel it other than it's a new person.
Exactly.
So like in your view, like looking ahead, what do you see as the biggest opportunities for Comfort Keepers and for the senior care franchise space overall?
It's a really good question, because when you look at the senior care space in terms of franchising, there's a number of different franchisors out there, right? But in terms of overall market share, the senior care industry is still predominantly very fragmented. And I think the trend is going to be more mainstreaming care along brands that are familiar, that brands that have been in place and have a longer track record, because you get that level of comfort from a family standpoint, right? You don't have to worry about if this thing's still going to be there, the next day, the next week, the next month or year. And then I just think with changes in payer sources, in terms of government payer sources, other third party payer sources, the industry is fairly sophisticated from an operational side. And so franchises from a folks that want to get into this business are going to play a really strong role with helping good folks who don't have that background be able to get in and operate a successful business in there, because of that training, because of that support, because of those systems.
Yeah, and let's kind of dig into that a little deeper. Like if somebody that's not in the healthcare space and they're looking to get into franchising, they decide Comfort Keepers is, the brand that they're going to pursue. They like the idea of helping people. They want to make money. How do you, as a franchisor, help the new franchisees feel supported when they launch their new business?
We've moved a person into this franchise development specialist role that works with all of our new franchisees, and that starts pretty much day one. Once you sign on to become a franchisee, we kick things off with a a welcome call. That franchise development specialist then begins having a series of one-on-one phone calls with them, starts getting them access to their pre-opening checklist, pre-training checklist. So they're going to, our goal is to have somebody open within 60 to 90 days from signing, right? So we've got a cadence that we're taking them through, surrounded by, checklists, to-do items, weekly phone calls, getting them connected with different vendors. One of the things that we start working on with them almost immediately is for them to apply for their home care license. So, because I think it's like 37 or 38 states now require some type of state issued license to operate a home care business, helping some states that can take up to 3 months, some states it can take 30 days. So getting them access to the resources to help expedite that process, because that's usually going to be the longest lead time and barrier to helping them get open, right? And then it's also, as they go through our 3 weeks of new owner training, as we get ready to roll out with them, it's also to help them understand the nuances of, hey, as a new franchise, you're going to be going through this balancing act of, hey, I'm hiring caregivers, but I don't have clients yet, right? Or I've got interest from clients, but I don't have caregivers yet. And helping them understand how that balancing act can be managed through training, and then also doing some field support with them not long after they open, and then continuing those weekly phone calls for a minimum of 3 to 6 months after they open, right? We want to kind of err on the side of giving them more support and them saying, okay, you know what, I think I'm good. I don't know if I need the weekly phone calls anymore, versus not giving them enough. So I just don't want to hand them an ops manual and, a couple online tutorials and say, good luck.
Good luck. Yeah. No, that's good. I mean, it sounds like you guys have you've done this a lot of times over the past 30 years. So let's talk item 7. The startup cost is between 116 to 188. What's included for a new owner when they launch their business?
Yeah, and that investment cost is really for a single territory franchise. So the investment starts off with our initial franchise fee of $55,000. That gets you the rights to a protected territory that's going to have anywhere from 200 to 300,000 in population. We want a minimum of 10% of the population to be age 65 or older, and typically looking for an average household income of about 65, 70,000 or higher. So it starts off with the franchise. Then we do require that you have an office outside of the home. It doesn't need to be a retail space or a storefront, but 500 to 800 square feet of commercial B or C level office space is going to be what they need to get the business started, because while you don't have a lot of interactions with clients or family members at the office, virtually none, the office does act as kind of like a caregiver recruiting center, right? They're coming in to do interviews, onboarding, and orientation sessions. So, that's just something that we have found over the years just doesn't work well if you try to do it out of a home-based thing. Most people would have transitioned to an office fairly quickly anyway. So we just require that from the start. So there's some costs in there for that. There's costs associated in there with getting your home care license. In states where the licensing is sophisticated, there could be up to $5,000 to $6,000 in associated state fees to get your home care license. We've got a couple of different consultants that we work with that will actually guide our candidates through that licensure process that they can choose to utilize. There's about $10,000 in there for initial advertising spend for both digital and some local advertising. And then obviously working capital, right? Because you're going to need to be able to fund the business at least for a minimum of 3 months while you're getting the business started up. So there's 3 months of working capital in there to help cover your business expenses while you're getting the business ramped up.
Yeah, and to get all that under 200K, I mean, it's a pretty affordable way to get in. And, those leases, I've leased space similar to what you're referencing, and it can be under $1,000 a month. And you don't really, you use it to drop your Google pin so that you can kind of do reviews, and then you have that place to interview the caregivers. So it serves its functional purpose, but like you said, it's not a storefront where it's going to be the place where you kind of recruit new clients. So in terms of item 19, can you share anything with us today about the financial performance of the franchise units?
Yeah, I think when looking at comfort keepers, we've got a very strong financial performance, and it's kind of echoed in our item 19. When you take a look at that, our average unit volume for a single territory is $1.3 million a
For a
year.
single
And
territory?
for a single
Yeah, that's
territory.
pretty strong. Wow.
Yeah. And we designed our item 19 specifically around revenue per territory versus per franchisee. We have per franchisee information in there, but we wanted to make sure we had that per territory information in there, because when you're looking at the item 7 for an investment, I always personally felt like it was a little bit of a misnomer if I'm looking at an investment for a single territory and then I go look at revenue numbers and I'm seeing it for per franchisee who might have 3 or 4
Right.
or however many territories. It wasn't 100% an apples to apples comparison. So we wanted to make sure candidates said, hey, if I'm thinking about buying one, what's the revenue potential of just one territory? And given our size and given the longevity that we've had, I think there's really strong numbers for a system of this size. So
Yeah, I would agree.
obviously something we're proud to talk to our candidates about.
For sure. So who are you looking for? Who's an ideal candidate to become a Comfort Keepers franchise owner?
Yep. The first thing I'll say is that it doesn't have to be someone that comes from a home care or a healthcare background. Obviously, we do have folks that have come from healthcare backgrounds as franchisees, but I would say the bulk of them don't come from that. So we're looking for folks that are really comfortable managing and leading teams, right? We talk so much about the caregivers. So, a decent sized business is going to be employing, 30 to 50, part-time caregivers. So somebody that is comfortable managing people, being in that leadership position, somebody who's got just a good business acumen, right? You can read a P&L, you understand, kind of how the back end financial metrics of a business work, right? Ultimately, also someone that really values customer service, ultimately because of what we're involved in, and B, really values employees, right? We don't want someone that looks at employees as kind of an expendable commodity. We want someone that really views employees of an organization the wheels that make the business go. And that's ultimately us. We talked earlier about, you're only as good as your worst caregiver, right? And so that all leads into good caregiver retention. So we need to have people with that mindset. And then ultimately, the other piece that kind of overrides this is that we're looking for people that are at a point to where, yes, they want to have a financially successful business, but they've got a passion for helping folks, or they're at a point to where they want to be involved in something that can make an impact, and people that are locally community oriented, because being able to get out into your community as well and talk about your business, I don't think it's specific to Comfort Keepers. I think it's specific to a lot of businesses, but it's definitely something that we look for as well too.
Yeah, I like how you put the emphasis on the franchise owner has to treat their staff really well, because that's how the staff is then going to in turn treat the client. And you want to have a culture that you create not only on the franchisor, but at every individual franchise operation, that like, this is the way we do it. We take care of our people and our people are going to take care of you. And I think that's going to be felt by the recipient of the care. So that makes a lot of sense. Scott, this has been great. Anything else you want to add to the mix before we wrap up today?
No, I just want to thank you for giving me the time. Obviously, it's something I'm passionate about. I've been doing franchising for a long time, senior care for a good amount of time as well. And anytime I get a chance to chat about it, I always take it. So I appreciate you having me on to talk a little bit more about us.
Absolutely. It was really nice to speak with you today. And if anyone listening would like to connect with Scott and his team to learn more about becoming a Comfort Keepers franchise owner, contact me at franchiseqb.com or on X at QBFranchiseQB. I'll get you connected. Thank you, Scott, so much for taking the time to get in the huddle with us today.
Thanks, Mike. Great time.
You got it. Thank you for listening to the Franchise QB podcast, where you're at the helm of your future as a franchise owner. If you enjoyed the content, please rate the show and recommend it to anyone that might be interested in franchising. Make sure to visit franchiseqb.com to subscribe to my newsletter and for an actionable playbook to go from walk-on to legend in your new business. Follow us on Twitter at QBFranchiseQB and join us every week for a new episode. See you next time.
Visit franchiseqb.com to take the next step of your journey towards wealth, independence, and franchise ownership. And remember, when working for the man gets old, you must do something bold. Thank you for listening.